Welcome to the Health System CIO Show. I'm your host, Editor-in-Chief Anthony Guerra. On today's episode, I'll be speaking with Darin Prill, VP and CTO with WellSpan Health. Darin, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Anthony. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Let's start off. You want to tell me a little bit about your organization and your role?
Yeah, sure. So WellSpan is here in southeastern Pennsylvania. We have 12 hospitals, 250 or so ambulatory locations scattered throughout the southeastern region here in Pennsylvania. We are a very ambitious organization. We've grown both by acquisition and organically, we have a very strong financial standing here in the community. So very well situated organization here. I'm the VP and CTO. I have not only the responsibility for the technical aspects of our IS organization, but I also have responsibility for information security as well as all third-party applications other than Epic. So it's a little bit bigger than a typical CTO role.
Okay, they're very interesting. Do you have a CISO?
We do. He reports to me.
Okay, and his name, I believe I know
Mike Schrader.
Mike Schrader. I've interviewed Mike. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Mike
Okay,
said
so
so.
he reports to you, so that's kind of
Yep.
interesting.
Yep.
What's your do you have a pretty solid background in security? I mean, I,
I
I
do.
I bet you could go be a CISO if you wanted to.
I could be a CISO, yeah, and have been before. I've been CTO and CISO at several organizations. My last organization, OU Health, my last organization where I was a permanent employee at OU Health. I was both CTO and CISO for a year as we were trying to find a CISO, and then hired a CISO to replace me.
So you've been around the block, right?
A little bit.
You're pretty seasoned. I just find it interesting. Like, what kind of what enticed you about this role? I mean, I have a feeling you had a lot of opportunities, or you had a lot of options, and you picked
Sure.
this role. What is it about this role that you liked?
Yeah, no, WellSpan, first of all, my wife works for WellSpan. She's a family practice doctor,
Oh,
runs a family practice residency program for WellSpan. So she joined about 2.5 years ago, and had been here at WellSpan. I was at OU Health, and then left OU Health when she took the WellSpan position because she had to travel a little bit. And I ended up doing a whole bunch of interim assignments, which was a lot of fun. Interim CTO at several organizations, interim CTO CISO at one. So had a lot of interesting roles there. But when this one came up, it intrigued me obviously because my wife works here. But more importantly, when I sat down with the COO, and she told me about how forward-thinking the organization is, and not just from a clinical perspective. We're really trying to be forward-thinking as far as AI and the use of AI in both clinical and non-clinical spaces. As well, we're priding ourselves on our ability to use that automation for actual monetary savings within our organization. So last year, for example, we had a goal of 400,000 hours saved with technology, either AI or technology improvements, and we saved over 400,000 hours last year. So, and we have a goal this year of 500,000 hours saved using automation and AI. So. It's just the organization was so forward thinking and the role was so much more expansive than a typical CTO role that it really was. I did have several opportunities that I was talking to at the same time, and this one really floated to the top for me. And the icing on the cake was I get to work with my wife. who unfortunately stole my email address. So
I just had a flashback of our little exchange, and I did
yeah,
guess at your email for my outreach, and I guess your wife forwarded you the
exactly.
email, and I was just laughing, and I told you this by email that I can just imagine if this was my situation, my wife would be like, "You got to stop. You got to fix it. You got to like, I had enough." Right?
She gets so many emails for me. It's
Oh
not,
my
I mean,
God.
everybody guessing email addresses.
Sure.
And so yeah, she stole the email address. I threatened to take it back. I said, I do know someone who can get
I'll
that
bet.
done, obviously,
I'll
but,
bet. She said,
but
"You're
I
like,
wanted a
honey."
happy wife, happy life.
Oh my
So,
God. I believe that. She doesn't know how much power you have, right?
you don't know how much power she has.
That's true. Oh my God. That's really funny. It's great stuff. Um, a couple of questions based
Sure,
on what you were saying, and I'm just going to go where it takes us. We may jump around a little bit. You talked
sure.
about um, saving hours,
Mhm.
and that's one of the discussions that comes up a lot these days is ROI.
Yep,
Um, and it really is a conversation that's very much in flux.
yep,
So on one end, I feel like there's a pull, obviously, for more concrete ROI, specifically around AI, like ambient listening. The
sure.
licenses can be expensive. There's a
Yep.
lot of positive anecdotal evidence that the clinicians like it. It's giving them
Mhm.
back time. Some extreme anecdotes about made me want to continue practicing medicine. So you hear those things.
Yep.
You also hear that these licenses are expensive, and we need, it's got to be more than just everyone feels good. There's got to be some metrics, soft or whatever behind it. There really is both sides of the spectrum. You're hearing, and I mentioned that because you talked about saving hours. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering if that's a different discussion than saving dollars. And if
Mhm.
both of those discussions are valid, um, but do we ever get to just talk about saving hours, or do we always have to talk about maybe saving dollars?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I mean that's something we struggled with. I know as we were developing how we were going to get ROI for all of this investment we're making in AI and AWS and all the investments we're making, and realistically, the thinking of this organization is, and I know other organizations may think differently, but this organization is it's not about cutting people. It's which would be the cost savings part. It's about making those people more efficient so that they can do their job either better or they can do their job quicker or they can do more of their job. And an example of that is, we've implemented Aidoc here in our radiology department. We're currently utilizing all of their modalities within our radiology practices, and we have seen significant give back to the radiologists in time. Not only time to read the radiology results, the radiology films faster, but also be able to do more of that and to take more time to look at the different parts of the films that they may not have been concentrating on. So it's a real, I mean, it's a real savings there. It's from a dollar perspective. Yeah, maybe down the road we won't have to hire another radiologist, which, as we all know, they're very hard to find these days. Um, but we're not looking to cut people, even on, like, when we talk about the nursing side, and we talk about being able to do ambient listening and nursing and being able to do co-nursing through virtual nursing. We use Artisite here as our platform. But we're not looking for how do we cut down nurses in our environment. It's how do we give them more time to be able to do their jobs, and more time at working at the top of their license as opposed to the bottom or middle of license. And I think that's all important when you look at the ROI. That you're not strictly trying to count dollars saved. You're also looking at the efficiencies gained by all of these different AI tools that we're deploying.
And are CFOs generally understanding of that discussion, um, or is this something that folks like yourself have to make the case for to the COO, CEO, CFO types?
Yeah, we absolutely have to make the case on every one of these. Even though, I mean, we have an innovation group that reports direct to our CEO. Mark Canderslots runs that group, and every AI that we deploy. Now, not every AI that we may test or that we may put, run through and take a look at. But everyone we deploy has an ROI attached to it. And we're both those soft savings, and, use soft in quotes, or, efficiencies gained and things like that, as well as any hard savings gained as well. And there are always some hard savings, but I don't think that you can, or at least I don't know that we've found an AI yet that actually gives you a hard savings enough to pay for it. You've got to look at the softer savings for these things and count that as a net positive to the organization and a net positive to our patients.
All right, very good. So this is very interesting. You mentioned that you are also in charge of third-party applications other than Epic.
Correct.
Now, that's really interesting to me, and I don't know if that's a common setup. It might be. We can go into that a little bit, but the reason I'm asking is because and we're going to get into all the AWS stuff in a minute, but
Sure,
the
sure.
reason I'm asking is because one of the biggest dynamics in healthcare IT for health systems is dealing with point solutions versus
Mhm.
working within their enterprise suite.
Mhm.
Let's just talk about Epic because it's the dominant platform and it's the one in
Sure.
question here. So, you mentioned Aidoc.
Mhm.
There's people have point solutions. Some people, especially around ambient, went with point
Yep.
solutions before Epic has came out with its tool, which it's come out with recently, and
Yep.
we see announcements of organizations signing on to that. I
Yep.
assume many of those organizations had third-party applications in place that they may transition off of at some point. Um, and so that's a big dynamic. We could talk about that
Yep.
in general,
Mhm.
but also in an organization like yours, where you've got a different individual role responsible for the Epic suite, and you
Mhm.
looking at third-party suites. If
Mhm.
I'm understanding the flow of things correctly, there is a flux in the industry between those two worlds and a
Yep.
tension.
Yep.
And so when you have different lanes, you still have to have much coordination
Yeah.
between the two individuals looking at these things because, again, you picture like a cell membrane where things can move across and back and
Exactly.
forth. What are your
Diffusion
thoughts?
across the membrane. Yep.
What are your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, no, and that's absolutely true. And especially in organizations that want to be innovative, the suite applications, Epic, may not have that functionality yet. And so you go down the road. Ambient is a great example, right? I mean, Ambient's been around for a couple of years now. Most organizations have done some kind of deployment with it. We use Dax Copilot for a while from Microsoft, and we deployed that out to about 500 physicians. But as you said, we came up against the license barrier, right? Which is, man, those licenses are expensive. We got to make sure that we're going to get value out of those licenses. So as we were looking at that and looking at other ambient solutions, Epic came with its ambient embedded in Epic, and with tighter integration and all of those good things that come from a platform. And we have made the switch, and so we're now currently deploying and the Epic solution here, and we're deprecating the DAX solution because to be able to bring that into the suite and have that tight integration gives you way more benefits than trying to, we've got a lot of third-party applications that have to connect into Epic. We call them co-travelers here. They have to go with Epic. And so when we made the move, the migration from on-prem to AWS, we had to be not only worried about Epic, but we also had to worry about all the co-travelers that go with Epic. And so when you have all those co-travelers, things become much more complex trying to move it. Now that we've basically deprecated one of those with Microsoft going away eventually within our environment, now we're just worried about the Epic platform. And there's, one of the things that my background, I'm an enterprise architect by background, and simplicity of architecture always appeals to me. The simpler we can make something, the easier it is to maintain, the easier it is to modify, the easier it is to upgrade. And so when you look at the platform plays, it becomes simpler. But again, when you want to be that innovative company, you want to be that forward-thinking company, sometimes you got to think out of the box. You got to look at those applications that are brand new, that are not integrated with Epic. And Aidoc is a great example, right? I mean, something like that is not in Epic, and I don't believe Epic has plans even to do something like that. But it's giving us tremendous benefit to have Aidoc in our environment.
So that's perfect. The real interesting, it sounds simple when we talk about it at a very high level, but the real interesting area are the co-traveler situations that are right on the edge.
Mhm.
Right? The obvious cases are easy, where it's Epic doesn't have this and everyone loves it and it's a no-brainer, versus it's in Epic and Epic's got a great product, so we're going with that. Like you got the no-brainers on, and then you have the real fine cases in the middle. That's where, and you tell me, that's where you need really good governance to get
Yep.
all the voices heard, so that Darin's preference for simplicity and total cost of ownership and security is represented and weighed, and
Yep.
the clinicians that want to use this co-traveler, potential co-traveler, have their voices heard and weighed.
Yep.
And somehow it goes in this magic black box of governance where everybody's weighed perfectly, and you come out with the answer, like there it is, right? We don't have to question it because it's
That's
perfect.
right.
It's a perfect answer. It weighed everything. But but how does the sausage get made there in the middle?
You've got to have, I think you said it earlier, a very close relationship between the folks that are the clinical folks that are running the Epic enterprise and the folks that are running all those other applications. And you've got to have, you've got to have an architecture that you're in a strategy that you're building towards. In our case, again, I think it's kind of weird. Our CMIO, who is a doctor, he's a pediatrician, Alex Petrone. Alex owns Epic. So it's actually owned by a physician. And his right-hand clinical person is a nurse. And so there is clinical representation in all the Epic decisions, right from the get-go. I mean, we always bring physicians in, and we always allow them to weigh their opinions as well in any of those decisions around, especially around clinical systems. But having a physician and having a nurse who's actually in charge of Epic really brings that patient-centered discussion right to the forefront. And then I bring in the more technical, the more practical, the more, connectivity and how do we interface and all those things. And we have a very, very solid, very stable relationship together. And so we talk those things through, and things like going with Epic Ambient just makes sense. It was an easy choice to do that because of again, all of the things we talked about earlier. So, I mean, we have a very good relationship here to be able to make those decisions and make sure that we get all of the opinion needed into those, especially the very critical decisions like, are we going to change our ambient? Right, that's a critical, and that's really a physician-led discussion, right? Because they're the ones right now who are using ambient. We're also looking at nursing ambient, and so the nurses now will have a say in looking at that and how we use that going forward.
Yeah, I think maybe you're helping me understand something here, because again, as the way I described it, I was always picturing a very ultimately somehow a metrics driven algorithm
Mm.
that somehow comes out with the decision, like I said, the right decision. But maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe it really is just conversations between human beings in a room where points of view are expressed and opinions are expressed and upside and downside. And maybe there is no, 7.6. So here's what we do. It's just sort of that conversations among human beings. Is that correct?
For our decision making process, yes, that is. I have seen a metrics driven and been part of a culture where it is more metrics driven, and the metrics weigh pretty heavily in the decision making process. So I think it's really different depending on the health system you're in and what the philosophy is here. Here we're very people centered, we're very patient centered, very people centered. And so we tend to make those decisions really around a table talking to each other.
And would it be fair to say that you would have an opinion about cost of ownership, integration, difficulty, and whatnot, but when it comes to cybersecurity, that may be somewhat of a red light more than a opinion. That may be a, hey
Yeah,
guys, this little mom and pop operation, it may be a beautiful, it work great, but under the covers, this thing's a mess. We can't bring it into our environment. And they may say, all right, Darin, well, and I've heard this where essentially folks like yourself are almost asked to be informal consultants to these
mhm,
smaller operations, and it's your job now to get it fixed up. So it's good enough
correct.
not to say no, to get it fixed up. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a very good process for intake where, an application is suggested by someone within the organization, sponsored by an SVP, hopefully. And then the first thing we try to do with that application is take it through a tech review. So we're doing that right up front. So we're looking at the tech, we're looking at the security of the system, we're looking how it fits in the architecture and all those things. And we're doing that up front so that we can form an opinion as well as form, what is the IT effort to put this in, whatever it is. And we give that feedback back to the sponsor of it and back to the IT steering committee. If there's something from a security perspective, it's right at the top because you're right. I mean, right now, security is one of the primary drivers for why we do tech reviews today. But the the days of things coming in, especially on the clinical side, are where they just come in and they show up and we're working on it after the fact are gone because of all the security concerns. We do work with some of the organizations that are smaller, especially again being an innovative organization, and trying to drive innovation within our organization and within healthcare. You work with organizations that are just getting off the ground, and so sometimes, yeah, we do sit down with them and say, "Hey, are you thinking about this? Are you thinking about that?" And we've got other environments where we can take that application and put it into an area where we can test it, and it's not within our production network.
Mhm.
And so we can actually get it up and running and actually see it without actually deploying it to our production or test networks that we have that connect in our environment. So, I mean, we've got ways of working with those organizations to get that done. I mean, even when we do third-party development, and we bring a piece of code onto our systems, we have to, we run it through a security review. We do a code review, and try to, stop things before they get here,
Right.
really.
All right, very good. Let's talk a little bit about your AWS migration. Lots of stuff to talk about with that, but why don't you just give us the overview of um, the reason for the project, like what the environment was pre AWS migration, what the obviously was suboptimal, or you wouldn't have done the migration. So the environment you were living in, what the challenges were, why you decided to go in this direction, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, actually, I wouldn't say it was suboptimal. I think it was working well. The problem was it was based on Broadcom VMware, and our Broadcom renewal was coming up. And the renewal, as you probably heard within the industry, Broadcom has been um, increasing the prices quite dramatically. I'm trying to think of a nice way to say it. Increasing the pricing dramatically such that it actually made sense to start to rethink our infrastructure and really see if there was another path we could go. So while it was the impetus, it wasn't the whole reason. The other reason is that, again, we are an innovation-based culture, and all of the folks, or a lot of the folks we were working with were already cloud-based, right? Their applications are cloud-based, their development is cloud-based, they're using AWS tools or Azure tools, and we wanted to be in a very similar environment that with our innovation partners. So we took the chance of looking at it from a different direction and saying, is this an opportunity for us to be able to put a better infrastructure in place that would more align with where our strategy is, where we want to go? And so we took some time, a very short period of time, to work with AWS, who's been an awesome partner of ours, and work through, is this even possible? Because of the time frame was, I joined in August of 2025, and April 2026 was the renewal. And so we had a very short runway to do all the things we had to do with AWS, get contracts in place, then to put up our AWS landing zone, and then be able to begin migrations.
Mm-hmm.
And so we worked through it with AWS and the AC/DC group, which is a group within AWS that does acceleration to the cloud. And they look for opportunities like ours to help us do that and get us migrated. And so they partnered with us, and we came up with basically a solution and an ROI that looked like it was going to work. So I presented it, to the executives here. We presented it to the board, and it was approved to go forward with that. And so it was obviously a major effort and a major investment in infrastructure for WellSpan.
All right. And again, what was the 17 weeks? What did you say was the need for it to be done so quickly?
The end of our Broadcom contract.
Right.
Yeah.
And AWS is sort of one of three big entities, Azure and Google.
Yeah.
Do some folks spread it around? You sort of just have focused on AWS. What are the upsides and downsides of being all in on one?
Yeah, we actually are multi-cloud. We have workloads in Azure. We have our Databricks instance. All of our Cogito, which is Epic reporting, comes out of Databricks. And so we have a pretty large environment within Azure as well. So we are managing multi-cloud. We chose AWS because they are they're very healthcare oriented. They have a healthcare practice. We're part of that healthcare practice, and they really understand what hospitals, health systems need in order to make the transition and get on cloud, and some of the barriers to that. And they were there right there beside us, helping put get rid of those barriers as we were moving forward. The other was, again, our innovation partners were primarily concentrated around AWS. They were developing in AWS, using AWS tools like Bedrock and other tools like that. And so it just made sense for us to try to align as well as we could with our other innovation partners.
Anything stay on-prem?
Yeah, some things have to stay on-prem just because of the latency that you add by going to the cloud. It's about a 17 millisecond latency, which is about 34 milliseconds round trip, which, for certain very time-sensitive applications like monitoring and some messaging apps and telephony apps that need need, sub millisecond, or, single digit millisecond response times, they had to stay on-prem. And so we do have we have small column closets deployed to the hospitals with small clusters of computers, of Nutanix system servers, and then we have 2 data centers that are still here and working. One here at the corporate headquarters, and then we have a colo at an Equinix facility. So we're very hybrid environment.
One of the biggest trends around cybersecurity is a focus on business continuity and working with emergency management to continue clinical care.
Yep.
How does this move to the cloud impact your business continuity plans?
Actually, it'll hopefully impact us positively. Our Epic DR is table stakes. I mean, you have to be able to do DR today with Epic. You have to be able to, have it. So we have Epic in 2 AWS environments, US East 1 and US East 2, so that they're separated geographically. They're separated by AWS regions. And we do fail. We're actually have our first test of the failover coming up in a couple of weeks. We're gonna actually fail over and run from the DR site. But what it also allows us to do is pick and choose where we want to do our DR, and allows us to look at things like cost effective. Allows us to look at things like how fast we can turn up systems, versus having systems on-prem that are doing nothing, waiting.
Hmm.
So, I mean, what it does is, I mean, when you're in the cloud, and you're doing DR in the cloud, and spinning up an instance of an application is as easy as punching a button for infrastructure as code, and spinning up that server. Your disaster recovery is not only quicker, but it's also more cost effective. And so we're looking to do that with all of our co-traveler apps, all of our Epic co-traveler apps. Some of them already have disaster recovery, some of them don't. But with this concept, we'd be able to build both. We'd be able to build disaster recovery for both. So it really is going to increase our ability to do business continuity for our clinical business really well. And on the non-clinical side, we use Oracle, so all of our disaster recovery is through the Oracle cloud. So I mean, even in that case, you could say we've got presence in Oracle cloud as well.
Very good. Any user impact on the transition?
The one thing that I'm the most proud of is that we had very little impact to our end users. We transitioned over 300 applications, 5,000 servers, Epic, all of the co-travelers, and there was little to no downtime as we were doing it. Our focus was always around how can we minimize the impact on the clinical side.
Hmm.
We could have done this very sloppily
Oof.
and done a lot of downtime, and it would have been miserable for our clinicians. But what we chose to do, working with Nutanix and AWS, is actually each application, other than Epic, each application only had to have minutes worth of downtime. You probably didn't even notice that we took it down, because we would take it down, we would do the Delta copy, and we'd be back up. And depending on how transaction heavy it was, it could have been literally seconds that we had it back up and running. Epic, of course, it's a lot bigger with all the co-travelers and making sure all the interfacing is right. And of course, we do a lot of testing when we come back up. So that was planned to be a 4-hour downtime, ended up being about a 2-hour downtime. But the next day, we had normal operations. So from a clinical perspective, I'm so proud of the team for the work they did to make sure that we minimized our clinical impact.
I would imagine this is one of the more stressful things a person like you would do. I don't know, right? I mean, you talk about putting everything on the line.
Yeah.
First you have to champion it, you have to sell it, you have to
Yep.
talk about the benefit, you got to get everybody on board, and then it's all on you, right? It's all got to go
Yep.
smoothly. You could
Yep.
take the whole place down. So that's probably an evening to remember.
Thanks for
Yeah,
championing my nightmare.
little PTSD for you. Well, it all went well, but my God, talk about
It
career
was
career defining moments.
It was, and that's what I told the team as we were going through it, is that this is a once in a lifetime thing. You're not going to do this ever again. I don't even want to contemplate that we would try to do something like this again. So, but it took just a tremendous effort by the team and really focusing in on, all of the work that had to happen. We did this in waves. So we did iterative deployment. So every 2 weeks was a wave. And then we had some small waves in between, and some on weekends to accommodate some of the other clinical things. But these folks were, they were spotless. We had a 96% success rate in moving our applications and servers. So 96% of the time, it came up the first time they did it.
Mhm.
That's just tremendous, given the time frame that we worked through.
Yeah, it's a lot of players involved, right? So you've got
Yeah,
your organization,
yep,
you've got the AWS, and you mentioned other partners like Nutanix, and you've got every single application vendor.
yep,
Epic is taking care of a lot of those applications, covering them, but all the other ones, like these have they you don't just move the application without interacting with the vendor whose application it is, right?
yeah.
So there's a lot going on there.
There is. We had 7 PMs managing all different aspects of the effort, and a program manager over the whole thing who was responsible for the orchestration of all of the different pieces and parts. We had AWS professional services who was side by side with us. We had Nutanix professional services working with us, not just on the Nutanix deployments, but also working on the migrations with us. So they
Hmm.
were, because of the way we used a Nutanix tool to do the migrations, they were there with us. We use Sublimation, who is a third party. They do transitions from on-prem to AWS. They're kind of the original, the OG folks who did this the first time. So we brought them in to help us with the Epic migration. We even had a partner with Cordea, and working with us on building out skills. Because
Hmm.
as you can imagine, our organization, we don't have those kind of cloud skills, and we had to get them very quickly. And so we brought in Cordea, who helped us develop curriculums for each person, track their progress through the curriculums, got people certified. We really spent time and effort and money on getting our folks reskilled and retrained, to be able to be cloud to support the cloud.
I don't know if you ran into any of this where you had team members whose skills were no longer going to be in great demand. You gave
Yep.
them the opportunity to be trained up on skills that were going to be in demand, and
Yep.
they just either said, I think I'll go somewhere else, or I'm a little late in my career. I don't want to, this is an old dog. I don't want to learn any new tricks. Did you run into a little bit of that?
Not much, to be honest. We had very little pushback in the organization about the new skills. I mean, I'm a very transparent leader. From the beginning, I made it very clear that we're betting on the cloud here.
Hmm.
And so, if you're going to stay as a legacy operator for us, then you've got to think about your role. Because as we transition, and it's going to take a little while, but eventually there won't be legacy roles. There'll only be cloud or the new infrastructure roles. There won't be, we won't have the people that are handling and working the older systems. Um, Great example is, the operations folks who today they monitor they monitor red, green, yellow, and they alert folks. So with the cloud, and as we move towards observability and really getting the engineers involved in that, we may not have as much of a need for operators who are just looking at screens, right? We want to kind of phase that out if we can, so that we can have each team member, watching their piece of the organization, or each team watching their piece of the organization, and so that skill. So all of my operators went through. The only thing I insisted was everybody had to go through a cloud basics course. Everybody. I don't care who you are. You're on the help desk, the service desk, you're in our field service organization. I got all kinds of questions when I talk to those organizations about why do I have to do this? It's not going to apply to me. And I'm like, I want everybody in the organization speaking the same language so that when somebody says NC2 server, you know what that means. It means we have a Nutanix server up in the cloud. If you don't know what that means, we're not going to talk the same language, whether you're on the service desk or you're one of my primary architects. I need everybody talking that language. So I insisted that everybody had to take the Cloud Basics course from AWS. Other than that, we gave them access to Skill Builder, and said, you can take whatever courses you want. We're paying for them. There's a whole bunch of free courses from AWS, and then there's a whole bunch of paid. I just said, if you want paid courses, we will get them for you, and we want you to go through it. You want to get certified, you can get certified in anything you want to get certified. We just opened up the training to them so that, even if you're an operator and you didn't want to be an operator, you want to be an engineer, okay, we'll go take the engineering courses. I'm okay with that. You're going to learn cloud skills. That's what I need, right?
I think that's brilliant. I mean, what a wonderful environment to work in where you're being told, hey, listen, here's the future. We're moving to the future. We want you to come,
Yeah,
but you got to jump on the train, right?
yeah,
Skill yourself up. I'm going to pay. You're saying I'm going to pay for it. I'll pay for it.
that's
I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful environment. And certainly listen, you learn a lot about certain individuals if they say,
You
no,
do.
no, I'm good. I'm not interested.
You do.
Not the best career moves, You tell it comes up all the time about AI in general.
Yeah,
Obviously, the world is moving in a direction. If you have a
yeah,
chance to get educated on that,
yeah.
you'd be silly not to.
You would be. I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think we're all the same, right? I mean, 5 years ago, I wasn't thinking about AI in clinical spaces. I wasn't thinking of AI even in my own technology space, right? That was 5 years ago. So I too have had to learn
Right.
how to use those tools and use them effectively for our benefit. That I've got to learn just as much as our service desk has to learn about these things. And so as things are shifting in our environment as technology people, we've got to be able to go along those paths. And at least to your skill level, right? I mean, you don't have to be like me where you have to understand strategy and how things are put together and all of that stuff. You just need to know how to use them, right? And generative tools and things like that. I mean, it's really important, and things are moving so fast, Anthony. And I think you know it probably just as well as I do. I mean, AI is moving so fast. Capabilities come out every day,
Yeah.
that we learn about, and it's hard to keep up. But I mean, we have to in order to be able to effectively apply these technologies to our organizations.
Well, and I think what you did is really very cool, and it's a great leadership case study. And I think we, want to make sure we get this message out. Leadership is number one. You have to have the vision, the education, the knowledge, the experience to say this is where things are going, right? And if we
Yeah,
want to be on this ride, there's like think about it as a journey by boat. We got to go to that island, right?
yeah.
Well, okay, if we want to go to the island, we got to build a boat. So
And
that's
then we
what you
all got to
do.
row together,
Then we
right?
got to row
I mean,
together. But the infrastructure that we've been talking about with AWS, I think of that as the boat, right? We want
mhm,
to go over there. We got to build the boat. Otherwise,
yeah,
we're not going to be able to do it.
yeah,
And I'd like you to give me a little more understanding of how the AI and the interaction of data between applications that we need to happen in the future
Hmm.
is dependent upon getting into an infrastructure like you're moving into. Why is
Hmm.
that what it takes? And what happens if you don't do that underlay? You don't build the boat first. You just either
Yeah.
you don't understand it, or you don't feel like you can take the risk. You don't feel like you can sell it. So you say, "Oh,
Yeah.
we'll just keep trying to get there on the top layer."
Right.
But you haven't built the boat. You're going to
Right.
keep running against trouble. What happens? Why is the data, and I'm guessing it's a function of the data staying siloed and not moving around where it needs to move.
That's it. It is. I mean, it actually comes down to a very simple problem. You've got all of these data silos that can't connect to each other, and patient means one thing in one environment and a different thing in another environment. So when you try to combine data sets, they don't combine easily, right? And so, you can't really take a data set and add other data sets to it because they don't conform to the same data models and data specifications and all of those things. And that one of the things that we're developing here, and trying to look towards is, and this is something I think the industry has been talking about is, a data lake with all of our data in it, right? And so that no matter what kind of data you need, you connect through a data layer that we develop and get to our data, right? And so you're an outside application, you need some data, you connect to an agnostic data layer, and then get into all of our data because it's all thrown together in a lake and properly brought together. That's the high level vision, and we're doing some of that today in Databricks. We bring in all of our Epic data, but then we also bring in some of our ERP data and our third-party data to augment that data. As we look at that, we've got to look at how do we expand that and really get it. Data is the key.
Yep.
It's access to the data and facilitating access to the data. I think is the future, especially for things like AI and LLMs. I mean, they need access to data. The more
Yeah.
data you give it, the better the algorithm gets, better that the
Huh.
LLM gets at understanding. I mean, you can see it today, and even just the generative tools. If you use
Yes.
ChatGPT enough, it understands your voice. It
Yeah.
can write things in your voice because it understands what you're looking for. So now when I say, hey, I need to present this to the board and I need 3 slides that summarize this topic, it's going to give me something back because it's got all my data in it, right? And it
Right.
knows the history. And it actually it allows me to actually, just like our radiologist, allows me to get time back because I'm not sitting here trying to develop
Mm.
slides.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, and I think you use a really good example. So I noticed with the different LLMs, I'm using them all. Um, it seems like ChatGPT has a better cross-chat understanding, its
Yeah,
visibility across chats, which is helpful, right?
yeah,
Because otherwise you have to live within a chat in order for it to have past context, which you
exactly.
want. I think with Claude, it really has segmented, siloed,
It does.
so it's
It
not
feels like that.
right? It's not pulling in the context or the information from a chat that
All
that
kinds of
that
other
would have been
chats. Right.
helpful for it answering the question. And
Yep.
what you want is context. You want it to
Yep.
pull together all the context so you don't have to
Exactly.
keep, and that's a silo. So it gives you a little
It is.
vision of what it's like dealing with a silo where it doesn't know what you did over there. And it
That's right.
would have been great if it did because that would impact the answer over here. So it's just a little microcosm of what you're
It
trying to
is.
do on a grand scale.
Yeah. No, it's actually a great analogy. I mean, it's really the more of that past information that it sees and more of the data you fed it, it has access to, the better it's going to be able to put the answers in context. And I
Right.
think that's important. It can answer anything.
Yes.
ChatGPT can go out and search the web and get you an answer, but it's not your answer.
Right.
It's an answer,
That's
right?
right. It's brilliant. No, it's great. Let me ask this, and I don't think I'm going to let you go because I'm already overtime with you, but I
I'm sorry.
appreciate it. Um, so I'm picturing it. Let's do it this way. let's say you were called into doing some free consulting, and you were going around, and people said to you, "Hey, I'm right on the verge of, we picked our cloud partner, and we want
Mhm,
to do what you did. And I put
mhm.
together a plan where we're going to do it over the next 2 years. We're not doing 17 months. We don't
Yeah,
have the rush you had, but we have a little more time. But
yeah.
anyway, here's my plan. What do you think? What would be something that you might see on there that you would
Mhm.
say, don't do that, or don't do that that way, because it's
Yeah.
something someone might have a tendency to do, but you've learned would be a bad idea?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I did put down some thoughts on that because I figured that was going to be a question.
I'm
Um,
not, I'm not, I'm not
it's not
predictable.
you. It's just
All
I kind
right,
of
go
figured you're
ahead.
going to ask that. But no, I mean, I think lessons learned from this. The first one, and I think the most important, is know your environment like the back of your hand. We have a CMDB. Everybody has a CMDB. Our CMDB, when we went into this, was dirty
Hmm.
at best. I mean, applications weren't updated. Links, applications weren't linked to the servers correctly. I mean, we had a mess of environment. So we had to start from the beginning basically and just go back and say, what actually is an environment in our environment? How many apps do we truly have? How many servers do we truly have? What is connected to what, right? We had to build that map. If we had gone into it with that map fully developed, our first couple of migrations would have gone a lot smoother. Just because
Ah,
you don't know how things are connected, you don't know exactly what servers. So every application has a set of servers that it could be one, it could be 20. If you don't know that full set of servers and you miss one, well, guess what happens? You're not going to get that application up because that server is going to be in the wrong place. And just things like that, and being able to plan your migrations well, knowing what applications you have, and knowing what the number of servers and where they are. I mean, it seems very simple, but it's probably is the key to getting the migrations correctly and being able to plan effectively ahead of time. The other thing
so
I would do,
what,
go
what,
ahead.
what, before you go to point two,
Yeah.
so you're saying you did this, but not fully. So you had it somewhat put together, but not fully. And if you would do it again, you would have fully taken care of this mapping.
I would have had my CMDB clean.
Okay.
I would have made sure that was clean because um, that was a struggle for trying to, when you're trying to plan, right? You're trying to plan something this big and you don't know all the parts. You can't plan out the migrations. So we actually started with only planning one migration ahead and we kept adding or subtracting things from it because we didn't know exactly what was supposed to go in there. Our last migrations were from a master set of applications and servers. We just went down, we checked them off, and they got moved into the migration process. It was so much simpler as we got further down the line because we had a much better idea of what our environment was that had to move. What was the
Hmm.
migration, volume, and also the things that we had to leave behind. Right? I mean, as you said, we had to deal with every vendor, every single application vendor. The only way we'd know if they um, were latency sensitive or not was we had to contact them. We had to
Hmm.
ask them. We
Hmm.
should have had that information in our CMDB so that we could have just pulled that up.
Hmm.
There was so much information missing from our CMDB that I think it was really key. A second thing is I would have done FinOps and CloudOps a lot earlier. I would have thought about that way earlier. I would have instituted that for. We started thinking about CloudOps and FinOps as we got towards the end of our migration, because it was like the next couple of weeks, we were going to own all of these cloud applications. And we're going to have to figure out both the financial and the operation side of it. That hit us like a ton of bricks. If we had done it earlier and planned earlier, I think that would have been successful. And then probably the third thing that I would tell people is there's migration and then there's optimization. they're different, right? So when we're migrating, we're not looking at costs. We're looking at how to get that application from on-prem into the cloud in in our case, the quickest method we could. But when you have time, you can still think it through, but you're not going to get it right exactly. We're now going through our optimization phase where we're aggressively looking at how we control costs. We're aggressively looking at how we can get data, disaster recovery set up for applications. It's those things. So you got to separate those out. Your migration is not going to be perfect. Your optimization is where you perfect what you did in migration.
Perfect, Darin. This has been a wonderful, incredible, and very fun conversation.
Yes,
I want to thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can reach out to you again down the road.
Anytime, Anthony.
Have a great day, Darin. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.